Under my protective suit, sweat pooled at the small of my back as I trudged through what remained of United Flight 93. Shanksville, Pennsylvania had become an unwilling host to America's nightmare. September 11th, 2001. Around me, other members of the recovery team moved with the same grim purpose. In a way, this was unfamiliar territory. None of us had words for what we were witnessing. Sector 4 clear, moving to 5, I reported into my radio, my voice sounding hollow inside my mask. Colonel Vance had given me specific orders that morning. Locate and secure the flight recorders. I walked methodically, scanning for anything that didn't belong in a Pennsylvania field. 3 hours into the search, I spotted something gleaming beneath a twisted sheet of metal. Not orange. I crouched down and carefully moved the debris aside. A cube. Metallic. About the size of a softball with precision-cut edges that looked machined to impossibly exact tolerances. I reached for it with my gloved hand, hesitating just before contact. Across its surface, geometric patterns were etched with mathematical precision, symbols I couldn't recognize that seemed to change when viewed from different angles. Most unsettling was the soft blue light that emanated from those etchings, pulsing in a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. A constant low hum vibrated through my gloves as I finally picked it up. "Major Keller, report." Colonel Vance's voice crackled through my radio. I swallowed hard. "Sir, I found something in Sector 5. It's not standard equipment. Elaborate, Major. It appears to be a metallic cube with unusual markings. It's emitting light and sound, sir." The pause on the other end lasted too long. "Secure the item, Major. Do not show it to anyone else on site. Remain at your location. Confirmation code Delta 7 Echo." "Confirmed, sir. Delta 7 Echo." I sat with the cube, keeping it partially concealed under a piece of wreckage. The hum penetrated my gloves, traveling up my arms like a current. 18 minutes later, 3 black SUVs with government plates rolled to a stop at the perimeter of the crash site. 6 men in immaculate suits emerged, moving with practiced efficiency. They didn't stop to sign in with the site commander. They didn't present credentials to anyone. They walked directly toward my position as if they'd known exactly where to find me. The tallest of them, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that revealed nothing, approached me directly. "Major Keller, the item." I handed over the cube, watching as he placed it into a lead-lined case without touching it directly. He used specialized handling equipment I'd never seen before. "Your phone and camera, please." I surrendered both. Another man connected my devices to a small portable unit, systematically deleting every photo I'd taken that day. A third pulled out forms on government letterhead. "Everyone who has seen this item will sign these documents immediately." "My team hasn't seen it," I said. "I followed protocol." He nodded once. "Nevertheless, we'll need to speak with all personnel in your vicinity for the past hour." Over the next 20 minutes, I watched as they gathered the other recovery workers, collecting phones and cameras, deleting evidence, having everyone sign documents without adequate time to read them. The man with gray hair pulled me aside. "Major Keller, you'll come with us now for debriefing." I glanced toward my commanding officer across the field, who gave a single nod. Their authority clearly superseded our military chain of command. The debriefing took place in a makeshift tent at the edge of the site. 4 hours of the same questions asked different ways. What exactly had I seen? Had I described it to anyone? Had I felt anything unusual when handling it? Each question more pointed than the last. I signed 7 different non-disclosure agreements. The language was explicit, acknowledging the existence of what I'd found would constitute treason against the United States. Penalties included life imprisonment or death. "Which agency are you with?" I finally asked as I signed the last page. The gray-haired man looked at me without expression. "That information is not relevant to your assignment, Major. What is relevant is that you understand the national security implications of what you've witnessed today. This conversation never happened. The item you recovered was a standard flight recorder, damaged in the crash. That is what your report will reflect. With respect, sir, that wasn't a flight recorder. Your cooperation is appreciated, Major Keller. Your service record indicates you're a man who understands duty. It wasn't an answer, but the threat was clear enough. Back in my temporary quarters that night, sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those strange geometric patterns. I felt again the vibration that had traveled through my gloves, a sensation distinctly different from mechanical humming. It had felt aware, as if the cube had somehow recognized me. I switched on the light and examined my hands. A fine, ash-like residue traced the lines of my palms and fingers, grayish with an almost metallic sheen. I hadn't handled any crash remains directly. My gloves and suit had remained intact throughout the recovery operation. I scrubbed at my skin in the small bathroom sink, but the residue remained embedded in my skin. As I lay back in bed staring at the ceiling, something basic had changed in my understanding of the world. We were told we were recovering evidence from a terrorist attack, a tragedy born from human hatred and extremism. But what I'd found in that field didn't belong in any terrorism handbook. It didn't belong anywhere in the reality I thought I knew. It would be days before the residue finally faded from my hands, and years before I understood what had really happened in Shanksville. 6 months to the day after Shanksville, my transfer orders arrived. No explanation, no warning, just reassignment to something called the 89th Chemical Response Battalion, stationed at Fort Detrick, Maryland. "Good luck, Keller," he said, already turning away. I drove to Fort Detrick. The big military research complex sat in the Maryland landscape with many layers of security that went beyond standard military protocols. At each checkpoint, my credentials received increasingly intense scrutiny. The final gate required not just ID verification, but retinal scanning and a voice print confirmation. "Welcome to Fort Detrick, Major Keller," said the MP, who finally waved me through. "Building 47C, they're expecting you." Building 47C looked plain from the outside. 3 stories of reinforced concrete with narrow windows and no identifying markings beyond its designation. Inside was different. The lobby had an extremely strict security checkpoint. After surrendering my phone and submitting to a full-body scan, I was escorted down a corridor to a conference room where Colonel Vance waited. 6 months hadn't changed him. Same straight posture, same cold eyes that studied everything. "Major Keller," prompt as always. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat, noting the thick folder bearing my name on the table between us. "I imagine you have questions about your transfer," Vance said, opening the folder. "The 89th Chemical Response Battalion exists officially to respond to chemical weapons threats within U.S. borders and at our overseas installations." "And unofficially, sir?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Directly to the point. Good. Officially, you are now assigned to a CBRN response unit. Unofficially, the 89th handles what we classify as Type X incidents." "I'm not familiar with that designation, sir." "You wouldn't be. It doesn't exist in any manual." Vance slid a document across the table. Type X refers to encounters with entities and phenomena that defy conventional explanation. Things that cannot exist according to our current understanding of reality, but nevertheless do. The document contained photographs, a house where gravity seemed to operate in reverse, with furniture clinging to the ceiling, a child with eyes that emitted visible light, something that resembled a human shadow moving independently across a wall. "You're talking about paranormal activity," I said, struggling to keep my voice neutral. "We avoid that terminology, Major. It carries unscientific connotations. We prefer anomalous phenomena, events and entities that operate outside standard physical laws." My mind flashed back to the cube in the Pennsylvania field, its impossible geometry and pulsing blue light. "Your experience at Shanksville made you a candidate for this unit," Vance continued, confirming my suspicion. Your psychological profile indicates a rare combination of adaptability and stability when confronted with the inexplicable. So that cube I found was a Type X artifact, yes, one of several recovered from various sites on that day. He closed my file. You'll report to Sergeant Frank Martinez tomorrow at 600 for orientation and equipment familiarization. He'll be your direct supervisor for field operations. Sir, I have more questions about Shanksville. I'm sure you do, Major, but this meeting is concluded. Vance stood. Welcome to the 89th. I met Sergeant Martinez the next morning in what looked like a standard military training facility until I noticed the unusual modifications to the firing range and obstacle course. Call me Sarge, he said, extending a hand that bore multiple scars and calluses. Everyone does. Sarge was stocky and solid with muscles from decades of practical use rather than a gym. His face showed a hard life, with a prominent scar running across his right eyebrow and down his cheek. His dark eyes looked at me with immediate intensity. Colonel says you saw something at Shanksville. A device. Some kind of technology I couldn't identify. Sarge nodded, unsurprised. First time's the hardest, the moment when you realize the world isn't what they told you. He led me through a series of reinforced doors, each requiring different security clearances, until we reached a large equipment room. Glass cases lined the walls, containing what looked like heavily modified military gear. Standard issue for the 89th, Sarge explained, opening one case. M4 carbine with custom ammunition. He handed me a magazine filled with rounds that glowed faintly blue at the tips. Conventional bullets pass through certain entities. These don't. He moved methodically around the room, showing me equipment I could never have imagined. Detection devices that registered energy patterns beyond normal spectrums. Communication systems that operated through encrypted quantum channels and containment units designed for materials that didn't obey the laws of physics. This one's my favorite. Sarge held up what looked like a flare gun. Temporal disruptor. Creates a 3-second bubble of accelerated time, useful when things get nasty. My mind struggled to process the implications of each device, each representing branches of science that shouldn't exist. Training runs 4 weeks, Sarge continued. Combat simulations in the morning, exposure protocols in the afternoon. Exposure to what exactly? Controlled anomalies. Can't have you freezing up the first time you see something impossible in the field. He led me toward another door. Speaking of which, the levels beneath the main facility housed a series of reinforced containment chambers. Each held something that challenged my understanding of reality. In one, a small plant grew and died and regrew in an endless cycle that took approximately 30 seconds. In another, a chunk of metal hovered permanently 3 feet above a platform, resisting all attempts to move it. We classify everything on a containment difficulty scale, Sarge explained. 1 through 10. 1s are stable, predictable, minimal risk. 10s are... He trailed off, his expression darkening. Let's just say we hope you never see a 10. In the final chamber, a recognizable blue glow caught my attention. Inside a transparent cube reinforced with some kind of energy field sat a small sample of luminous material, pulsing with the same rhythm I remembered from Shanksville. Substance 7, Sarge said, noticing my fixation. Found at various sites over the years. That sample came from a meteor impact in Siberia back in 2008. I saw something like it, I said carefully. In Pennsylvania. Sarge's demeanor changed instantly. He took my arm and guided me away from the observation window, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. Listen carefully. Don't ever mention Shanksville openly. Not here, not anywhere. Certain missions are compartmentalized even within the 89th. But it's the reason I'm here. Look around, Major. Notice anything? He gestured subtly to the corners of the corridor. I spotted them then, tiny cameras positioned to cover every angle, some conventional, others emitting spectrums of light I couldn't fully identify. Surveillance is everywhere. Questions about what they call Incident Zero, their code name for the 9/11 related anomalies, have a way of making personnel disappear. Disappear where? That's the point. Nobody knows. Sarge's eyes held a warning. My brother worked this unit before me. Asked too many questions after finding something at the Pentagon site. 3 weeks later, transfer orders came through. Nobody's heard from him since. The implication sent a chill through me. So, what am I supposed to do? Pretend I never saw what I saw? I'm saying play their game, learn the protocols, become the perfect soldier for the 89th. He paused, making sure no one was within earshot. And keep your real questions to yourself until you know who you can trust. In the weeks that followed, I did exactly that. I mastered the specialized equipment, memorized containment procedures, and studied the classification system for anomalous entities. I became the model recruit, earning praise from Colonel Vance himself for my exceptional adaptation to unit protocols. At night, in my Spartan quarters, I maintained a mental catalog of everything I learned, searching for connections to what I'd discovered in that Pennsylvania field. I developed a habit of checking for surveillance before reviewing my thoughts, and kept my most important observations completely internal. Whatever had been on Flight 93, whatever that cube represented, was important enough to create an entire classified military unit. And something told me we weren't just finding these objects. Someone, somewhere, understood exactly what they were. A year had passed since my recruitment into the 89th Chemical Response Battalion. I'd completed 17 missions by late 2002, each one challenging my understanding of reality. Our deployments ranged from investigating strange energy readings in abandoned mines to containing creatures that defied biological classification. I'd grown accustomed to the impossible, learned to fire weapons loaded with ammunition that shouldn't exist, and followed Sarge's advice to perfection. I became the model soldier while keeping my questions private. The call came at Oro 200 on a Wednesday. Millfield, Ohio, had gone silent. A small farming community of roughly 5,000 residents had stopped responding to outside communication after reporting several violent attacks. Local police contact ceased 12 hours ago. 6 of us deployed within the hour. Me, Sarge, and 4 specialists equipped with our modified gear. Colonel Vance briefed us on the transport plane, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of a tactical display. Satellite imagery shows no mass evacuation, he said, swiping through thermal scans that showed scattered heat signatures throughout the town. Whatever happened was fast. Initial reports mentioned multiple assailants with unusual strength and resistance to injury. "Another Type 4 outbreak?" asked Landry, our containment specialist. "Unknown. Treat all civilian contacts as potentially compromised." Vance handed each of us a small silver case. "New countermeasures, injectable neutralizers if you're exposed to biological agents." Sarge caught my eye briefly, his expression grim. Neither of us believed this was just a biological outbreak. We landed at a small airstrip 5 miles outside Millfield at dawn, continuing by unmarked vehicles. The morning fog clung to the fields, limiting visibility to about 20 yards. Our convoy slowed as we reached the town limits. A school bus sat jackknifed across the main road, its yellow frame dented and windows shattered. "Perimeter team, establish containment boundary half-mile radius," Vance ordered through the comms. "Primary team with me." We exited our vehicles in tactical formation. The silence was sudden and heavy. No birds, no distant conversations, not even the hum of electricity from nearby buildings. Just our boots on asphalt and the occasional creak from abandoned vehicles. "Motion at 2 o'clock, whispered Davis, our point man. "Inside the gas station." Through my scope, I saw movement behind the store's broken windows. A figure stumbled between aisles, its gait unnatural and jerking. "Possible civilian," I reported, moving to investigate. "Keller, Martinez, approach with caution," Vance ordered. "Rest of you, secure the perimeter." Sarge and I moved in tandem toward the gas station, weapons ready. The entrance door hung from a single hinge. Inside, the smell hit immediately. Rotting meat mixed with a metallic tang that burned my nostrils. "Hello? U.S. military. We're here to help," I called out, following protocol for civilian contact. An ugly gurgling sound came from behind the counter. The figure lurched into view, a middle-aged man in what remained of a flannel shirt and work pants. His skin had a grayish cast, stretched tight across his frame. Black fluid leaked from his eyes and the corners of his mouth. When he saw us, his jaw opened impossibly wide, dislocating with an audible pop. "Contact confirmed hostile," Sarge said calmly into his comm, moving to neutralize. The man, if he could still be called that, rushed us with unnatural speed. Sarge fired 3 standard rounds into his chest. The impacts jerked the figure backward, but he kept coming, black fluid now pouring from the bullet wounds. "Standard rounds ineffective," I reported, switching magazines to the specialized ammunition we'd been trained with. The rounds glowed faintly blue at the tips, the same technology I'd first seen during training. I aimed and fired once. The round struck the man's forehead, and instead of exiting the back of his skull, it seemed to release a pulse of energy that rippled through his body. He collapsed instantly, the black fluid evaporating into a grayish smoke. "Specialized ammunition effective," I confirmed. "Subject neutralized." Sarge knelt beside the body, careful not to touch the dissipating residue. "This isn't a biological, it's type 7. "Animated corpses?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "With an energy signature similar to what we saw in Nebraska last month." He stood, checking his weapon. "We need the full kit, and we need a secure base of operations." We rejoined the team outside, reporting our findings. Vance's expression remained impassive, but I caught the slight tightening of his jaw, the only indication that something had surprised him. "The police station is 2 blocks north," he decided. "Defensible position with communications equipment. We secure it, then assess the town's status." Moving through Millfield was like walking through a town caught in panic. Cars abandoned mid-turn with doors hanging open. A grocery store with shopping carts still full of food. A playground with a child's jacket caught on a swing, fluttering in the light breeze. We encountered 3 more infected en route to the police station, all displaying the same gray skin, black fluid, and unnatural hunger. Each time, only our specialized ammunition proved effective, disrupting whatever energy animated the bodies. The station was largely intact, with reinforced doors and few windows. Inside, we found evidence of a last stand, spent shell casings, overturned furniture, and bloody handprints along the walls. No survivors. "Set up command center in the main office," Vance ordered. "Davis, get communications established with headquarters. Landry, secure any samples from the neutralized subjects." While the team worked, Sarge accessed the police computer system. Most files were standard small-town records, but a recent report caught his attention. "Found something," he called out. 3 days ago, local farmer reported finding what he described as a weird-looking rock on his property after hearing what he thought was thunder in the night. I looked over his shoulder at the screen. The report included photos of a rock-like object approximately the size of a basketball. Its surface contained geometric markings, precise patterns etched into the material that seemed to change when viewed from different angles. My pulse quickened. The patterns were identical to those on the cube I'd found at the Shanksville crash site. The farmer brought it into town to show the local high school science teacher. Sarge continued reading. 12 hours later, first reports of violent attacks. Vance appeared behind us, his expression darkening as he viewed the images. "Meteorite impact, most likely. Martinez, Keller, you'll head to the farm to recover any remaining fragments. Rest of the team will begin securing the town center." Over the next 48 hours, we methodically cleared Millfield building by building. The infected numbered in the dozens, each displaying the same symptoms. We established a protocol: specialized ammunition for neutralization, followed by collection of remains for later incineration. The farm visit confirmed our suspicions. We found a small impact crater with traces of the same material seen in the photos. Fragments of the meteorite had been scattered by the farmer's handling. Each piece emitted a faint hum similar to what I'd experienced with the Shanksville cube. We collected everything using lead-lined containment units. The most difficult moment came on the second day. We were clearing a residential neighborhood when movement from a second-story window caught our attention. A small figure peered out briefly before ducking away. Possible survivor, I reported. Child approximately 8 to 10 years old. We approached the house cautiously, calling out reassurances. When no one responded, Sarge took point, entering through the front door with me covering. The house appeared untouched, family photos still arranged neatly on walls. Movement upstairs, I whispered, hearing floorboards creak. We ascended slowly, checking each room. In what appeared to be a child's bedroom, we found a young girl huddled in a closet. Her skin had already begun showing the gray discoloration around her neck and arms, black fluid forming at the corners of her eyes. Partial transformation, Sarge said quietly. Early stage. The girl looked up at us, her eyes still showing fear and recognition, humanity not yet fully gone. She tried to speak, but only managed a gurgling sound as black fluid spilled from her mouth. Sarge knelt down, keeping a safe distance. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Emily, she managed, the word distorted. "Emily, we're here to help. Can you tell me what happened?" She struggled visibly, fighting against whatever was transforming her. "Mom, touched the rock, got sick, tried to bite me." Her back arched suddenly, a spasm shaking her small frame. When she looked at us again, her eyes had clouded over with black fluid. In one fluid motion, Sarge raised his weapon and fired a single specialized round. The energy pulse rippled through her, and she collapsed. He remained kneeling for a long moment afterward, his weathered face impassive save for a muscle working in his jaw. "Had to be done," he said finally, standing. Another minute, and she'd have been fully turned. I said nothing. What could I say? He was right, and we both knew it. But watching him make that call, seeing the weight of it on his shoulders, I understood something fundamental about Sarge that day. His gruff exterior wasn't an act. It was armor built from choices like this one. On the third day, we located a group of survivors barricaded in the town's community center. 32 people, mostly those who had been farthest from the meteorite when the outbreak began. They'd witnessed the initial transformations and managed to fortify their position before the infection spread throughout the town. It started with Mr. Harmon, the science teacher, explained an elderly man who introduced himself as the town's doctor. Bill Jenkins brought in this weird rock he found. Harmon handled it barehanded, studying it. By that evening, he'd turned gray, attacked his wife. Anyone he bit changed too, but slower. Others just changed from being near fragments of the rock for too long. The survivors provided crucial information about infection vectors. Direct contact with the meteorite caused rapid transformation within hours. Bite transmission took 12 to 24 hours. Proximity exposure to fragments required approximately 48 hours of sustained contact. By the fourth day, we'd neutralized all infected residents we could locate, 73 in total. Recovery teams collected the meteorite fragments, and specialized units began the process of incinerating the remains using a chemical compound that left nothing but standard ash. The survivors underwent what Vance called standard reintegration protocols. I watched as Division 6 personnel arrived, establishing a medical tent where each survivor received treatment for chemical exposure. The treatment included an injection that Landry quietly informed me contained memory suppression compounds. Gas leak at the agricultural supply store, a Division 6 agent explained to the sedated survivors. Toxic fumes affected town residents. You're lucky to have survived. The memory loss is temporary, a side effect of the gas. I stood beside Vance as the operation concluded, watching the survivors being loaded onto buses for medical observation at a facility I suspected specialized in reinforcing cover stories. "Sir," I said carefully, choosing my words, "the markings on the meteorite fragments matched what I saw in Shanksville, on the cube." Vance didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Major Keller, your non-disclosure agreements regarding Incident 0 remain in effect. There are no connections to be drawn because officially, nothing unusual was recovered from that crash site. With respect, sir, these aren't isolated incidents. The geometric patterns, the energy signatures. That's enough, Major." His voice remained measured, but carried a warning edge. "Your observation skills make you valuable to this unit. Your speculation makes you dangerous, to yourself and others. Remember Sergeant Martinez's brother. The threat wasn't subtle." I nodded, falling silent as we watched the last containment team depart with their lead-lined cases. That night, back at our temporary barracks, I stepped into the bathroom to wash away the day's grime. As I scrubbed my hands under hot water, I noticed it. A fine, ash-like residue tracing the lines of my palms. Grayish, with a metallic sheen. The same residue I'd experienced after handling the cube at Shanksville. I hadn't directly touched any of the meteorite fragments. My gloves had remained intact throughout the recovery operation. I stared at my hands, a cold realization settling in my gut. Whatever these objects were, the cube, the meteorites, they weren't just affecting those who came into direct contact with them. They were affecting me differently, and somehow Colonel Vance and Division 6 knew more than they were telling anyone in the 89th. I scrubbed until my skin was raw, but the residue remained, stuck in my skin and wouldn't wash away. January 2003 came with bitter cold that penetrated our thermal gear as we made our way through the Appalachian wilderness. 4 months had passed since Millfield, and I'd spent them watching for the telltale residue on my hands after each mission. Sometimes it appeared, sometimes it didn't. I never reported it. Our 4-person team moved through a narrow ravine, following coordinates where 3 hikers had vanished 5 days earlier. Search and rescue had discovered their camp in disarray. A tent shredded to ribbons, hiking gear scattered across 30 yards of forest floor. The local authorities found no blood, no bodies, just an unusual powdery residue that triggered our unit's involvement. "Thermal imaging showing nothing unusual," Davis said, adjusting settings on his scanner. "No heat signatures beyond expected wildlife." Sarge led point, his rifle ready as he navigated the uneven terrain. "Tracks end about 50 yards ahead. Campsite should be just beyond that ridge." The 4th member of our team, Williams, carried our containment equipment. His eyes darted between the trees, seeking threats in every shadow. "Altitude affecting anyone else?" Williams asked, his breath visible in the cold air. Feeling lightheaded. "Just nerves, kid," Sarge replied without looking back. "Keep it together." I checked my own scanner, noticing slight anomalies in the atmospheric readings, getting some unusual barometric fluctuations, air pressure dropping in localized pockets. We crested the ridge, and the campsite came into view. What remained of the tent hung in shreds from a bent frame, the bright blue fabric fluttering in the winter wind. Backpacks lay torn open, their contents strewn across the clearing. "Secure the perimeter," I ordered. "Williams, set up the field sensors, 20-yard radius." While Williams deployed our detection equipment, I approached the remains of the tent. The fabric was ripped apart with jagged edges showing great strength had been used. I crouched down, examining the ground beneath. A fine, crystalline powder covered patches of exposed soil, similar to frost but with a faint bluish tint. "Got the same residue here that was in the preliminary report," I called out. "Collecting samples, ding." I sealed a small amount into an evidence container, noticing how it caught the light oddly when I looked at it from the corner of my eye. "Sensor grid online," Williams announced, "calibrating for standard detection protocols." The sensors were the 89th's proprietary technology, capable of detecting energy signatures, spatial distortions, and materials that shouldn't exist, according to conventional physics. Williams activated the central hub, and immediately the readout spiked. "Major, I'm getting massive readings," he said, a tremor in his voice. "Spatial displacement throughout the entire clearing." Sarge moved to the sensor display. "Pattern matches a Type 6. Active camouflage." My stomach tightened. Type 6 entities could bend light around themselves, making them invisible. We'd encountered only 2 previously, both smaller specimens contained without casualties. "Everyone activate UV filters," I ordered, attaching the specialized lens to my tactical goggles. "And ready sound dampers. If it's here, it's likely using ultra-high frequency for echolocation." "Movement," Davis whispered, his rifle tracking something I couldn't see. 3 o'clock near the fallen log. Through my enhanced vision, I caught it, a ripple in the air. But this was focused, shaped roughly 8 feet long and moving deliberately around our position. "I see it," I confirmed. "Williams, ready the UV strobe. Davis, flank right. Sarge, with me." Williams pulled the UV strobe from his pack, a modified lamp designed to temporarily disrupt certain types of camouflage. We'd developed it after the incident in Montana, where 2 agents had been killed by an entity they never saw. The air rippled again, this time moving faster, circling our position. A high-pitched keening began just at the edge of hearing, painful enough to make my teeth ache. "It knows we can detect it," Sarge said, his voice steady despite the escalating threat. "Preparing to attack." "Williams, strobe on my mark," I said, tracking the distortion as it accelerated. 3, 2... The air suddenly moved violently. The ripple surged toward Williams with impossible speed. Before I could finish the countdown, before Williams could activate the strobe, the invisible force struck him. His body jerked violently backward, lifted 3 feet off the ground. His scream stopped as his tactical vest ripped open from shoulder to hip. He collapsed to the ground. "Contact! Contact!" Davis shouted, firing his weapon at the rippling air where Williams had been hit. "It's moving!" I shouted, grabbing the fallen UV strobe. 10 o'clock, heading for the trees!" Sarge unleashed a volley of covering fire while I activated the strobe. Pulses of ultraviolet light swept across the clearing. Where they touched the invisible entity, its camouflage faltered. For split seconds, we glimpsed parts of its actual shape. Crystal-like limbs that bent light. A segmented body partly existing in another dimension. "Containment protocol," I ordered, rushing toward our equipment pack. "Davis, keep it visible." Davis maintained a steady rhythm with the strobe, the flashes showing glimpses of our target. It moved precisely, each limb appearing and disappearing as it circled back toward us. I reached William's body and the equipment pack beside it, trying not to look at his vacant eyes as I retrieved the containment generator. The entity changed tactics, no longer circling but charging directly at Davis. Through the strobe flashes, I saw it fully for the first time. A crystal-like bug with 12 segmented limbs and a triangular head with compound eyes that reflected the UV light. "Davis down!" Sarge shouted. Davis dropped as Sarge fired a specialized grenade from his underslung launcher. It detonated in mid-air, releasing a cloud of charged particles designed to temporarily solidify changing entities. The cloud covered the area where the creature had been, particles sticking to its partially visible body. "Contained for 50 seconds, Max," Sarge called out. "Make it count." I activated the containment generator, creating a field that would trap the entity between dimensions, unable to fully enter or leave our reality. "Need to drive it into the field," I shouted, moving to position the generator. "Sarge, north side. Davis, keep it illuminated." The creature sensed the trap. It charged toward me with that same impossible speed, its crystal-like body now partially revealed by the clinging particles. I fired my weapon, specialized rounds hitting its leading edge. The creature pulled back, making that high-pitched sound that hurt my head. When it charged again, it came from above, dropping from a change in space that our sensors barely caught. I felt rather than saw the impact as it struck me from behind, sending me flying through the air. My body crashed against the wall of a small cabin at the edge of the clearing, a structure I hadn't noticed until that moment. Pain shot through my ribcage. I couldn't breathe, and I slumped against the cabin's foundation stones, gasping for air. Through watering eyes, I saw Sarge and Davis executing the trap we'd practiced, Sarge forcing the now visible creature toward the containment field, while Davis maintained visibility with the strobe. As I struggled to breathe, I noticed the stone foundation I was leaning against. Old markings covered the surface, geometric patterns carved with extreme precision. Even through the pain, I knew I'd seen these before. The same patterns on the cube at Shanksville, and the meteorite fragments in Millfield. My broken ribs hurt as I took out my phone, quickly capturing several images of the markings before putting it back in my pocket. No one could see me do this, not even Sarge. This evidence needed to be mine alone. "Field stabilizing!" Davis called out. "Entity contained!" I pushed myself upright, each movement sending pain through my chest. By the time I rejoined them, the creature was fully captured in the suspension field, its true shape now completely visible within the energy bubble. It twisted and bent in strange ways, as if testing its prison. "Williams?" I asked, already knowing the answer from Sarge's grim face. "Dead before he hit the ground," Sarge confirmed. I nodded, allowing myself one moment of silent acknowledgement before focusing on our captured specimen. "Start preparations for transport. HQ will want this one intact." The extraction team arrived 2 hours later, a specialized unit equipped for transporting dangerous anomalies. With them came the inevitable Division 6 representative, who surveyed the scene with cool efficiency. "Major Keller," he addressed me as medics wrapped my chest to stabilize my fractured ribs. "Preliminary assessment? Type 6 predatory entity with phase-changing abilities," I reported formally. "Likely responsible for the missing hikers. No signs of remains, possibly consumed or transported elsewhere." He nodded, eyes moving to the cabin. "And the structure?" "Abandoned hunting cabin," I said, keeping my expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in my mind. "No tactical significance." His attention lingered on the foundation stones, the very ones I'd photographed, before he turned away. "We'll take it from here. Colonel Vance expects your full report within 24 hours. As the team loaded our captured entity onto their transport, I overheard a conversation between the Division 6 agent and his assistant. "Another breach from the same source," he said quietly. "That makes 4 this quarter." "Should we notify the advisory council?" the assistant asked. "Not until we've contained all instances. The cabin will need to be raised, standard protocol." I maintained my position, pretending to focus on the medic's instructions while processing what I'd heard. Same source. 4 breaches. The patterns connecting Shanksville, Millfield, and now this remote cabin weren't coincidences. They were connected, intentionally. Back at Fort Detrick 3 days later, my ribs taped and my body fueled by military-grade painkillers, I created a simple cipher based on a chess notation system I'd learned as a child. In a journal disguised as a standard mission log, I began recording my observations. Site patterns are identical across 3 contexts. Geometric configurations suggest language or coordinates. Division is aware of the source, but conceals its nature and origin. Entities are diverse but connected. Material residue consistent post-contact. Evidence of intentional access points created at each location. I would add to this journal after each mission, mapping connections that Division 6 and Colonel Vance never intended anyone to find. Something was attempting to enter our world, or perhaps someone was deliberately creating doorways to let it in. Between 2003 and 2005, I developed a double life. By day, I was Major James Keller, an exemplary officer of the 89th Chemical Response Battalion. By night, I became something else entirely, an investigator piecing together a puzzle no one wanted solved. I maintained my ciphered journal meticulously, adding entries after each mission, 17 containment operations over 2 years, each adding pieces to a pattern that grew more disturbing with every connection I made. The residue continued to appear on my hands intermittently, though I never reported it. I wasn't sure if others experienced the same phenomenon or if I was somehow unique in my reaction. In April 2004, we deployed to Sedona, Arizona. The mission brief described unexplained disappearances and locals reporting living darkness in a network of caves. The reality proved far worse. We entered the cave system in full tactical gear. Me, Sarge, Davis, and Lopez, who had replaced Williams after the Appalachian incident. The deeper passages opened into a natural chamber where darkness moved against darkness. Our lights couldn't reach the darkest areas, like the shadows were eating the light. "Movement at 3 o'clock," Davis whispered, training his weapon on a patch of darkness that seemed denser than its surroundings. The shadow rushed toward us with purpose. Lopez fired first, specialized rounds designed to disrupt energy patterns. The bullets passed through the entity with no effect. "Fall back," I ordered, but too late. The shadow engulfed Lopez. His body went rigid, then relaxed. When he turned toward us, his eyes had gone completely black. "The door opens both ways," Lopez said, but the voice wasn't his. It echoed with multiple tones speaking at once. Those who opened it do not understand what they've invited. "Who are you?" I demanded, keeping my weapon trained on what used to be Lopez. Lopez's body smiled, an expression too wide for his face. "We are what waits between. The arrival comes soon. The patterns are almost complete." Sarge deployed a quantum disruptor, an experimental technology we'd only received a month earlier. The device sent out a pulse that temporarily changed reality in a small area. The shadow entity pulled back from Lopez's body, momentarily vulnerable. "Now!" Sarge shouted. We fired synchronized rounds into the exposed entity. It shrieked with a sound that existed beneath hearing, more vibration than noise. The shadow collapsed in on itself, condensing into a small crystalline object that clattered to the cave floor. Lopez survived but remembered nothing. Division 6 personnel arrived within hours to collect the crystalline remains and establish a containment perimeter around the cave system. I managed to pocket a small fragment of the crystal before they arrived. Later analysis under my personal UV light revealed the geometric patterns I'd seen before, etched throughout its structure. 3 months after Arizona, we contained an anomalous mold in the bayous outside New Orleans. The growth converted organic matter, plants, animals, even human remains, into crystalline structures resembling coral. Each formation displayed precise geometric patterns identical to those I'd documented from the Flight 93 device. The containment operation succeeded, but not before I noticed how the crystals seemed to pulse in rhythmic sequences when in proximity to each other, almost like communications. Between field missions, I leveraged my security clearance to access restricted archives. Late nights in the records facility beneath Building 47C yielded disturbing insights. Anomalous activity had increased exponentially since 2001. Before 9/11, the 89th typically responded to fewer than 5 Type X incidents annually. By 2004, we were averaging 3 per month. Every recovered specimen contained trace elements of what our classified materials called Substance 7, the same luminous blue material I'd first encountered at Shanksville. The records indicated it possessed impossible properties: negative mass under certain conditions, an apparent violation of conservation of energy laws, and the ability to influence organic tissue through proximity alone. My biggest breakthrough came in December 2004. Using terminal access codes I'd carefully collected over months, I accessed personnel files related to the Shanksville recovery operation. The men who had confiscated the cube were identified only by alphanumeric designations, but cross-referencing security protocols led me to scattered references of Division 6. Further digging revealed Division 6 wasn't technically a government agency. It operated outside traditional oversight as a specialized task force formed after the 1947 Roswell incident. Their original mandate involved the containment and study of non-terrestrial technology, and biological specimens. The 89th, I discovered, had been created specifically to serve as Division 6's field operations team, though most members remained unaware of the connection. I compiled my findings carefully, always conscious of surveillance. My apartment in Frederick, Maryland became my secret investigation base. I constructed a hidden panel in my closet floor where I stored physical evidence: the crystal fragment from Arizona, mold samples from Louisiana, soil containing trace elements of Substance 7. Each item added evidence pointing toward a coordinated effort to introduce anomalous materials into our world. The confrontation with Sarge came in February 2005. I returned from a training exercise to find him sitting in my apartment, my hidden floor panel open beside him. "Lock the door, Major," he said quietly. My hand moved toward my sidearm instinctively. "If I wanted you dead or arrested, we wouldn't be having this conversation," Sarge continued, his expression unreadable. I secured the door and faced him. "How long have you known?" "Since Millfield." Sarge gestured to my collection of evidence. "They assigned me to watch you after you asked too many questions about the cube. You've been careful, but not careful enough. The betrayal stung more than I expected. I'd come to trust Sarge more than anyone else in the unit." "So what happens now? Do you report me to Vance, to Division 6? Sarge shook his head. "You're not the first to connect these dots, James." He reached into his pocket and removed a worn photograph. A man in military uniform stood beside Sarge, their resemblance unmistakable, despite the age difference. "My brother Michael worked for the 89th before either of us," Sarge explained. "In 1997, he was part of a containment team that encountered something in North Dakota, a structure with the same patterns you've been documenting. He started asking questions, looking for connections. What happened to him?" Sarge's jaw tightened. "Officially, he died in a training accident 3 months later. Unofficially, he contacted me the night before his death. Said he'd discovered something about Division 6. Something about what they were really doing with the anomalies we contained." "Did he tell you what it was?" "No," Sarge said, his expression hardening. The call cut off mid-sentence. His body was found the next morning, classified as an accident during a night training operation. No autopsy was permitted. Sarge closed my hidden panel and stood, looking at me intently. "I joined the 89th to find out what happened to him. Spent years working my way into position. When they assigned me to watch you, I realized you might be getting close to the same truth he discovered. I processed this revelation carefully, so you're not here to stop me." "I'm here to help you," Sarge said, "but we need to be smarter than my brother was. Whatever this is, these patterns, Substance 7, Division 6's real agenda, it got him killed. We need to find the truth, but we do it carefully, under perfect cover." That night, we formed a pact. We would maintain our exemplary service records while continuing the investigation together. 2 sets of eyes, 2 sets of access, 2 people watching each other's backs. We established coded communications and dead drops for sharing information too sensitive for digital storage. The investigation accelerated with Sarge's help. His access to security protocols complemented my scientific background. By September 2005, we'd compiled enough evidence to build a working theory. Division 6 had been experimenting with what appeared to be technology designed to create stable access points between dimensions. The geometric patterns worked as a kind of address system, coordinates to specific locations in other realities. The anomalies we encountered weren't random. They were the result of controlled breaches, tests of increasing scope and ambition. Then came the Nebraska mission alert. The call arrived at 0300, unusual timing even for emergency deployments. I was ordered to report immediately for briefing, no details provided over standard channels. The briefing room contained our standard team: me, Sarge, Davis, Lopez, plus Colonel Vance and 3 individuals I didn't recognize. They wore no identifying insignia, but their immaculate black suits and perfect posture marked them clearly as Division 6 representatives. One of them, A tall man with close-cropped gray hair studied me with unnerving intensity. I felt like I'd seen him before. Colonel Vance looked more tense than I'd ever seen him. This operation has been classified Level Ultra. No communication with anyone outside this room until mission completion. No standard field reports. All documentation will be handled directly by Division 6. He activated the briefing screen, displaying satellite imagery of a rural area. 40 miles northwest of Omaha, Nebraska. Farm belonging to the Jensen family. 18 hours ago, they reported unusual phenomena on their property. Local authorities investigating lost contact after entering this structure. The image zoomed to show a large grain silo standing apart from the main farm buildings. Thermal imaging shows no signs of life within the quarantine zone, Vance continued. Preliminary readings indicate extreme spatial distortion centered on the silo. Division 6 has established a 5-mile exclusion zone under the cover of an agricultural chemical spill. One of the Division 6 representatives stepped forward. This incident has been designated an ultra-priority containment operation. Your team will enter the anomaly zone, assess the nature of the breach, and if possible, seal it using specialized equipment we will provide. The man's voice triggered a flash of recognition. Though older now, I was certain he was one of the men who had taken the cube from me at Shanksville 4 years earlier. "Sir?" I asked carefully. "What type of anomaly are we dealing with?" The Division 6 representative looked at me coldly. "Major Keller, you're looking at what we classify as a Type 10 incident, a complete dimensional breach." The room fell silent. In 4 years with the 89th, I'd never encountered anything above Type 8. According to our classification system, Type 10 represented the highest possible threat, a full-scale incursion from another reality into ours. "Transport leaves in 30 minutes, Vance concluded. "This is not a standard containment operation. Division 6 believes this breach is connected to previous incidents your team has encountered. You've been selected specifically because of your experience." As we filed out to gather our equipment, I caught Sarge's eye. A subtle nod passed between us. After years of searching for connections, we were being sent directly to what might be the source. Whatever waited in Nebraska represented the culmination of everything we'd been tracking since Shanksville. The Division 6 representative watched me as I left the room. His cold eyes showed he knew I had information I shouldn't. The question was whether he thought that knowledge would help the mission, or if he'd get rid of me once it was done. The truth I'd sought for years waited in Nebraska. I just had to survive long enough to find it. Our Black Hawk crossed the Nebraska plains under the cold January moon. 4 days had passed since the briefing at Fort Detrick, and everyone on our transport was tense. No one spoke. Davis checked his weapon for the 5th time. Lopez stared blankly at the floor. Sarge caught my eye briefly, his face revealing nothing, but the slight nod said a lot. 5 minutes to drop zone, the pilot announced over the intercom. Colonel Vance unfastened his harness and moved to the center of the cabin. The Division 6 representative, the man I now recognized from Shanksville, stood beside him with the same cold eyes I remembered. "Final briefing," Vance said. "Hastings went silent 36 hours ago. Population 19,000. No communications in or out. Satellite imagery shows vehicles still in the streets but no visible personnel." The Division 6 man activated a handheld projector. Energy readings concentrated beneath the Axis chemical processing plant on the east side of town. Whatever happened started there. "Rules of engagement?" I asked. "Secure the site. Identify the breach point. Deploy the containment device." The Division 6 man handed Sarge a metal briefcase. "This is a prototype reality anchor. It creates a localized stabilization field that should seal any dimensional rifts." "Should?" Sarge questioned. "It's never been field tested on a Type 10. The man's eyes turned to me. "Major Keller will handle the technical deployment. His unique experiences make him most suitable." The implication hung in the air. They knew about my residue episodes. Maybe they'd always known. The helicopter touched down in an empty field half a mile outside town limits. We exited in tactical formation, equipment ready for immediate hostilities. The night air bit through my thermal gear, Nebraska winter showing no mercy. Minimal noise, standard formation, treat as hostile territory, I ordered. Sarge, you've got point. We moved toward the town in silence, night vision active. The outskirts appeared normal, neat suburban homes with cars parked in driveways, porch lights still glowing. But the silence was absolute. No dogs barking, no distant television sounds, not even wind. First anomaly, Davis whispered, pointing to a house on our right. The building's door stood open, swinging gently though there was no breeze. On its surface, someone had painted a geometric symbol in luminescent blue, the same patterns I'd documented for years. The substance glowed with the known light of Substance 7. Same markings as Flight 93, I muttered to Sarge. They're everywhere, Lopez said, sweeping his light across neighboring homes. Each building bore similar symbols, some simple, others complex, all glowing with that distinctive blue luminescence. We entered the first house, weapons ready. Inside, a family dinner lay abandoned. 4 plates of half-eaten food, chairs pushed back as if the occupants had simply stood up and walked away. No signs of struggle, no blood, just emptiness. Check upstairs, I ordered Lopez while the rest of us secured the ground floor. The Kit Davis timer still ticked. A television played to an empty room. A child's homework sat on the coffee table, math problems half completed. No one upstairs, Lopez reported upon return. Beds made, nothing disturbed. We checked 3 more houses with identical results. Hastings hadn't been attacked. Its population had simply vanished in the middle of ordinary lives. As we approached downtown, the geometric symbols grew more frequent and complex. They covered entire building facades, the blue glow creating eerie pools of light on the empty streets. Cars stood abandoned, some with doors open and engines still running. Energy readings increasing, Davis reported, checking his specialized scanner. Getting stronger toward the east side. The chemical plant, I confirmed. We crossed the silent town, passing more evidence of sudden departure. A movie theater with popcorn still warm in abandoned bags. A bar with full glasses on tables. A police station with incident reports, half-typed on computer screens. The Axis chemical facility stood at the town's edge, a big industrial complex surrounded by chain-link fence. The main gate stood open, a security booth empty. The symbols here were different, more precise, more elaborate, covering every available surface. This wasn't random, Sarge observed. These patterns are deliberate. They're building on each other, like programming code. The factory interior was standard industrial architecture, concrete floors, exposed pipes, massive chemical tanks. Emergency lights lit up empty workstations. The control room showed no signs of struggle, just more abandoned posts. Energy source is below us, Davis said, following his scanner readings, directly beneath the main processing floor. We found it in the center of the facility, a perfect circular hole, 20 feet in diameter, cut through the concrete floor. The edges weren't broken or jagged. They were perfectly smooth, as if the material had simply ceased to exist in that precise space. That's not possible, Lopez whispered. The floor is reinforced concrete 2 feet thick. A metal staircase had been constructed down one side of the hole, descending into darkness. The steps weren't industrial standard. They had the same precision craftsmanship I'd seen in Division 6 equipment. Someone built this access point, I said. Recently. Division 6? Sarge asked quietly. I nodded. Has to be. Orders, Major? Davis asked. I took a breath. We go down, full tactical spread. Lopez, your rear guard. The staircase descended at least 60 feet before opening into an underground chamber that defied explanation. The space was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium, with a vaulted ceiling supported by columns inscribed with the geometric patterns. The architecture was unlike anything I'd ever seen, combining elements that appeared ancient with clearly modern components. This facility predates the town, I realized aloud. They built Hastings on top of it. Or built it under Hastings without anyone knowing, Sarge countered. The blue glow was stronger here, emanating from channels in the floor that formed an elaborate pattern converging at the center of the chamber. And there, arranged in concentric circles around a central platform, was the missing population of Hastings. Bodies, hundreds of them. Men, women, and children were positioned with mathematical precision in a pattern that mirrored the markings from the Flight 93 cube. Each corpse had been mutilated in an identical fashion. Chest cavities opened, organs removed, skulls trepanned with surgical precision. Lopez turned away, retching. Davis made the sign of the cross. Sarge looked furious. This wasn't an invasion, I said, the horrible truth dawning on me. It was a ritual. At the center of the human pattern stood a machine unlike any I'd ever seen. It combined modern technology, servers, power conduits, digital interfaces, with components that seemed impossibly ancient and advanced simultaneously. Crystalline structures pulsed with inner light. Metallic components moved and realigned without visible mechanism. At its core, a sphere of pure energy rotated slowly, its surface rippling like disturbed water. "The portal," Davis whispered. As we approached, the sphere's rotation accelerated. The surface bulged outward, stretching like a membrane under pressure. Something was pushing through from the other side. "Containment protocols," I ordered, trying to maintain professional detachment despite the horror surrounding us. Davis set up the perimeter sensors. Lopez, cover our backs. Sarge, help me with the reality anchor. The Division 6 briefcase contained equipment I'd never seen before. Complex technological components with the same hybrid appearance as the portal machine. Sarge and I began the assembly process according to the minimal instructions provided. "James," Sarge whispered as we worked, "look at the control panels." I looked at the modern interfaces surrounding the portal. Each screen displayed the same logo, Division 6's insignia. "They built this," I said, understanding suddenly. This wasn't containment. This was an attempt to open a controlled doorway. "That failed," Sarge added grimly. The portal's surface ruptured with a sound like tearing reality, a noise that existed somewhere between frequencies, painful in its wrongness. Something emerged from the breach. Not a creature in any conventional sense, but a changing mass of components, both mechanical and organic, that seemed to rewrite reality around itself. It expanded outward like fractals growing in 3 dimensions, each new extension uniquely horrifying, yet mathematically precise. "Deploy the anchor!" I shouted. Before we could activate the device, the entity lashed out. Not physically, but mentally. An overwhelming force crashed into my consciousness, filling my mind with visions of impossible geometry and vast, cold intelligences watching from between dimensions. I saw civilizations rise and fall across countless realities. I saw the true purpose of Division 6, not to protect humanity, but to forge communication with entities that existed beyond conventional reality. I heard Lopez scream. Through watering eyes, I saw him turn his weapon on Davis. "They're inside you!" he shouted, his face contorted with terror. "I can see them moving under your skin!" Davis dove for cover as Lopez opened fire. "He's compromised!" Davis shouted, returning fire from behind a concrete pillar. The entity continued to expand, tendrils of impossible matter extending toward us. Each appendage terminated in structures that resembled human faces frozen in expressions of agony. Sarge grabbed my arm, pulling me back to alertness. "Focus! The anchor!" I forced my mind back to our mission, fighting through the visions. The reality anchor was nearly assembled, but the central power core remained inactive. "Manual activation required," I said, reading the diagnostic screen. "Someone has to activate it from the control panel next to the portal." Sarge nodded once. "Cover me." Before I could protest, he charged toward the control panel, firing his specialized weapon at the entity's extensions. The rounds tore through its changing mass, causing brief disruptions but no permanent damage. I provided covering fire, emptying my magazine toward the largest concentration of the entity's mass. Lopez and Davis continued their firefight on the chamber's opposite side, each convinced the other had been compromised. Sarge reached the control panel and began the activation sequence. The entity seemed to recognize the threat. A massive tendril of energy lashed toward him with impossible speed. "Sarge!" I shouted in warning. He looked up, saw the attack coming, but continued the activation sequence. As he pressed the final command, he turned and shoved me back with all his strength. The energy tendril struck him in full force. His body convulsed as impossible energy coursed through him. I scrambled to my feet, rushing to his side as he collapsed. "Sarge! Frank!" I cradled his head, watching helplessly as blackness spread through the veins of his neck and face. His eyes found mine, clarity fighting through the pain. "Should have known," he gasped. "Should have realized sooner." With trembling hands, he pressed something into my palm, a small data drive. "The truth," he whispered. 2001 wasn't the beginning. "Stay with me," I pleaded, but the blackness had reached his eyes, turning the whites to empty voids. "Find where it started," he managed before his body went limp. Rage and grief surged through me as I turned toward the portal. The entity continued to expand, its mass now filling nearly a quarter of the chamber. The reality anchor was activated but needed to be deployed directly into the portal's energy field. I grabbed the device and charged toward the machine. The entity's tendrils lashed at me, one grazing my shoulder with cold fire that numbed my entire left side. I kept moving, stumbling the last few feet to the portal's edge. With my remaining strength, I emptied my weapon's specialized ammunition directly into the machine's core, creating disruptions in its energy field. As the system destabilized, I shoved the reality anchor into the fluctuating portal. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The portal began to collapse, sucking the entity back toward its origin point. The entire chamber shuddered as reality reasserted itself. Concrete cracked, support columns began to fail. "Evacuate!" I shouted to Davis, who had subdued Lopez during their fight. "The whole place is coming down!" We dragged Lopez toward the staircase as the facility began to collapse around us. The entity fought against the portal's collapse, its extensions grasping at anything solid, pulling chunks of the ceiling down in its desperation. We reached the surface level just as Division 6 personnel flooded into the chemical plant. The representative I recognized from Shanksville directed his team with cold efficiency. "Secure the subjects," he ordered as his men surrounded us. "Prepare the cleansing protocol." "You built that thing," I accused, still supporting the semi-conscious Lopez. "You brought that entity here." The man regarded me without emotion. "Your service is appreciated, Major Keller, but your understanding is limited." "Sarge is still down there," I said. "Sergeant Martinez will receive full honors," he replied mechanically. "Your team will be debriefed separately." They separated us, leading each to different vehicles. Through the window of my transport, I watched as more Division 6 personnel established a perimeter around the facility. Special equipment was deployed, devices I'd never seen before, even in my years with the 89th. As we drove away from Hastings, a massive explosion tore through the night sky behind us. The shockwave rocked our vehicle. In the rearview mirror, I saw a mushroom cloud rise above what had been the chemical plant. The explosion's radius expanded, consuming the town block by block. "Containment protocol complete," the driver reported into his comm. "Site sterilized." 3 days later, the official story broke across national news. A catastrophic accident at the Axis chemical facility had released toxic chemicals, requiring the evacuation and quarantine of Hastings, Nebraska. The death toll was reported as 17. Plant workers caught in the initial explosion. 19,000 people were erased from existence. Their lives, their homes, and their entire town were wiped away by Division 6's cleansing protocol. I woke to the sterile white ceiling of Walter Reed Military Hospital, the same view I'd had for 3 months. My body ached from injuries the doctors only partially understood. The official diagnosis in my medical file read PTSD resulting from a training accident, a convenient fiction that erased the truth of Hastings, Nebraska. No one mentioned the 19,000 people who had vanished. No one spoke of the ritual arrangement of bodies, or the entity that emerged from the portal, or Sarge's final moments. According to all official records, none of it happened. Colonel Vance visited twice during my stay. Each time, he stood at the foot of my bed with hands clasped behind his back, asking routine questions about my recovery while his eyes communicated a clear warning. We both knew the unspoken rules of this game. "The 89th appreciates your service, Major Keller," he said during his final visit, "but given your condition, medical discharge seems the most appropriate course." "And if I want to stay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "That wouldn't be advisable for someone in your situation." I signed the discharge papers the next day. The military machine that had defined my life for years now efficiently processed me out of existence. My security clearances were revoked, access cards were deactivated, and personal effects from my office were delivered in a single cardboard box. 3 weeks later, I moved into a small apartment in Pittsburgh. The city had no particular significance except its distance from Fort Detrick and a rental market cheap enough for my military pension. The one-bedroom walk-up on the 3rd floor became where I both lived and hid. Nights were the worst. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the portal rippling like disturbed water. I heard Lopez's screams. I felt Sarge's body go limp in my arms. The only reliable defense I found was bourbon, cheap and plentiful. It couldn't erase the memories, but it blurred them enough to occasionally permit sleep. The data drive Sarge had pressed into my palm before dying remained my singular focus. I purchased a laptop with cash from a pawn shop, keeping it disconnected from any network as I methodically reviewed its contents. The drive contained thousands of files, decades of classified material far beyond anything I'd been authorized to see during my service. Most files were fragmented or encrypted, but what I could access painted a horrifying picture. Division 6 had not simply discovered the Flight 93 device in 2001, they had activated it deliberately. According to internal memos, the geometric patterns on the cube were similar to artifacts recovered from Roswell in 1947. For decades, Division 6 had been cataloging these artifacts, studying the patterns, and attempting to create what they called dimensional apertures. The Flight 93 cube was their first major success. The cube's activation had opened doorways for entities to enter our reality, creating what the documents called harvestable anomalies. The program's purpose was explicit: acquire and reverse engineer anomalous technology for military applications, regardless of civilian casualties. Everything, Millfield, the Appalachians, Sedona, Hastings, had been part of a calculated escalation. They weren't containing threats. They were creating them, then sending us in to collect the results. The revelation left me vomiting in my bathroom. I realized I'd spent my military career unknowingly helping with something terrible. 2 months into civilian life, I contacted a journalist, not a major network reporter, but a freelancer named Diane Walsh who specialized in government accountability stories. I used a burner phone, spoke in vague terms, and arranged to meet at a public park in downtown Pittsburgh. I never made it to that meeting. When I returned to my apartment after buying coffee that morning, I knew immediately something was wrong. The door was locked exactly as I'd left it, but something seemed off inside. Someone had been there. My suspicions were confirmed when I found my hiding place empty. The data drive was gone, along with the notebooks where I'd written my analysis. Even the laptop had vanished, despite being hidden beneath a loose floorboard under my bed. I wasn't alone in the apartment for long. The knock came as I was frantically checking my other hiding spots. 3 firm raps, professional and unhurried. When I opened the door, I recognized him immediately, the Division 6 representative from Shanksville and Nebraska. He hadn't aged a day in 4 years. "May I come in, Major Keller?" he asked, though he was already stepping past me. I backed away, maintaining distance between us. I'm not a major anymore. Once 89th, always 89th. He looked around my sparse apartment. Your living conditions have deteriorated. Perhaps we should have monitored your transition more closely. What do you want? He turned to face me. Your meeting with Diane Walsh has been canceled. She received a better offer from a media outlet in Europe. Very sudden. I felt sick. If you heard her, Ms. Walsh is perfectly fine. Simply redirected. He produced a small silver case from his pocket and placed it on my Kit Davis counter. Division 6 appreciates your discretion regarding classified matters. You murdered 19,000 people. Unfortunate containment necessities. He opened the case, revealing a syringe filled with amber liquid. This conversation serves as a courtesy, given your service record. Any attempt to disclose classified information will result in your permanent containment. There will not be a second warning. He left the syringe on the counter and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. The choice is yours, Major. Continued peaceful retirement or a regrettable intervention. After he left, I stared at the syringe for hours. The implied message was clear. Self-administer or wait for them to do it forcibly. The amber liquid would probably look like a heart attack or stroke on a standard autopsy. Clean. Efficient. Deniable. I poured myself a double bourbon and carried it to the bathroom. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I'd lost 20 pounds since Nebraska. My hair had threaded with gray. Deep lines carved paths from my nose to the corners of my mouth. The pill bottle sat on the edge of the sink, painkillers prescribed for my physical injuries. The math was simple. The entire bottle plus the bourbon would end things quickly. No more nightmares. No more looking over my shoulder. No more knowledge I couldn't share about horrors I couldn't prevent. I unscrewed the cap and poured the pills into my palm. 30 white tablets. More than enough. My hand trembled as I raised the pills toward my mouth. I remembered Sarge's last words clearly. Find where it started, he had gasped with his final breath. I let the pills scatter across the bathroom floor. Whatever Division 6 had taken from me, my career, my comrades, my peace of mind, they wouldn't take this. Sarge had died giving me that drive, believing I could do something with the information. If I ended things now, his sacrifice meant nothing. I flushed the pills, emptied the bourbon down the drain, and then methodically cleaned my apartment. If I couldn't fight with evidence, I'd have to find another way. Over the next year, I rebuilt myself. I stopped drinking. I started running each morning, pushing my body until my lungs burned and the mental fog lifted. I took odd jobs, security guard, warehouse worker, anything that paid cash and required minimal background checks. In early 2007, I applied to the Pittsburgh Fire Department. The physical demands and focus on saving lives rather than taking them offered structure my military mind craved and redemption my conscience needed. My military experience helped fast-track the application, though I kept details vague about my final deployment. The first time I walked into a burning building, the heat and chaos triggered a flashback to Nebraska. I froze for 3 seconds, my lungs seizing as the portal's energy tendrils reached for Sarge in my memory. Then training kicked in. I pushed through, found the elderly man trapped in his bedroom, and carried him to safety. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in months. The fire department became my new mission, but I never stopped watching for signs of what I now knew existed beyond normal reality. I created a system, cataloging news reports of unexplained phenomena, tracking patterns, noting geographic clusters. When a chemical spill in West Virginia led to evacuations in 2008, I recognized the containment protocols in news footage. The hazmat suits bore standard markings, but I spotted 2 operators from the 89th. They were still operating, still harvesting anomalies, still covering their tracks. I needed to be smarter this time. Working alone had nearly gotten me killed. If Division 6 maintained surveillance on me, and I assumed they did, any obvious investigation would trigger their regrettable intervention. I needed allies. The breakthrough came in 2009 when responding to an apartment fire in Oakland. As my team cleared the building, I noticed a bookshelf in one resident's apartment. Among standard titles sat 3 technical manuals with binding identical to those used for 89th Field protocols. Too specific to be coincidence. I ran the tenant's name through public records and discovered Thomas Davis had served in the military during the same period I had. The Davis I knew from the 89th would now be around the same age. I waited 3 weeks before approaching him, establishing surveillance to ensure he wasn't actively part of Division 6. When I finally made contact, I used coded language from 89th Field manuals. His recognition was immediate, his caution obvious. "You shouldn't be here," he said when he opened his door. "Hastings," I replied simply. His expression turned serious. "That operation doesn't exist in any record. I was there. So were you." He glanced past me, checking the hallway before reluctantly stepping aside. 5 minutes. Then you leave and never come back." Inside, we spoke in hypotheticals and coded references. He'd been discharged 3 months after Nebraska, diagnosed with acute schizophrenia after reporting impossible geometries and entities between dimensions to military psychologists. Division 6 had thoroughly discredited him before releasing him into civilian life. "Are you still having episodes?" I asked carefully. "That's what they call them. Episodes." Davis's laugh held no humor. "I see things sometimes. Patterns in normal objects, doorways where there shouldn't be any." "You're not crazy," I said. "Neither am I." "Doesn't matter. No one would believe either of us." There might be others, former 89th who were discharged after experiencing things Division 6 wanted contained. Davis looked at me for a long moment. "What are you suggesting?" "Information sharing. Carefully. Documenting patterns while staying below their radar." He considered this, then wrote something on a piece of paper. "Martinez's brother had a partner before his accident. He lives in Detroit now. Start there." That paper started a network that grew over the next 3 years. Former members of the 89th scattered across the country, all discharged after witnessing things that contradicted official narratives. Each carried physical or psychological scars. Each lived with the same fear of Division 6 intervention. We set up a communication system using encryption protocols based on the geometric patterns themselves. We used the very symbols Division 6 studied to hide from them. Dead drops, coded messages in online forums, and carefully structured meetups allowed us to share information without creating detectable patterns. By 2012, our network included 17 former 89th members. We documented 37 incidents bearing Division 6 signatures, towns quarantined for chemical spills, research facilities destroyed in gas explosions, private citizens committed to psychiatric care after reporting impossible phenomena. Each incident matched the pattern of deliberate breaches Sarge had documented on the stolen drive. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were witnesses. And one day, when we gathered enough evidence even Division 6 couldn't erase, we would become something more dangerous to them, whistleblowers. I kept my head down, my work at the fire department providing both cover and purpose. Each life I saved felt like a small redemption for those lost in Hastings. Each documented anomaly brought us closer to understanding Division 6's endgame. The nightmares never fully disappeared, but they changed. Sarge still appeared in them, but now instead of dying in my arms, he would look at me with approval as I gathered the information he'd died to bring me. "Keep going," he would say. "Find where it started." And I would wake, knowing that somewhere in our growing collection of information, the answer waited. Division 6 had taken everything from me, but they'd failed to keep the truth hidden. We just needed to figure out how to use that truth. 10 years had passed since I'd walked away from the 89th Battalion with nothing but nightmares. Pittsburgh had become home, my work with the fire department providing both purpose and cover. Our network had grown cautiously. 23 members now, scattered across the country, all former 89th personnel who'd seen things they couldn't explain and paid the price for their questions. We maintained strict protocols, communicating through encryption methods based ironically on the same geometric patterns Division 6 studied. The symbols that had opened doorways to other dimensions now helped us hide from those who controlled them. The evidence we'd gathered pointed to an unmistakable escalation. Anomalous events had increased 73% since 2010. Weather patterns showed localized disturbances that meteorologists couldn't explain. Missing persons cases spiked in regions where we documented unusual energy readings. Something was building. Davis had developed a sensor based on equipment we'd used in the field, modified to detect trace amounts of Substance 7. The modified device fit inside a standard fire department air quality monitor, allowing me to scan locations without raising suspicion. 3 times in the past year, it had alerted me to residual traces during routine calls. Each time, Division 6 personnel arrived within hours to assist with the incident. My radio crackled to life on a Wednesday morning in July 2015. Engine 17, respond to structure fire, Riverside Industrial Complex, Building 7. I pulled on my gear and boarded the truck with practiced efficiency. The warehouse district sat along the Monongahela River, a collection of aging structures that had once housed Pittsburgh's manufacturing might. The ride took 12 minutes. Smoke billowed from the 3rd building in the complex, dark and thick against the summer sky. "Keller, Rodriguez, take the east entrance," Captain Mercer ordered as we deployed. "Initial sweep for survivors." Rodriguez and I masked up and entered through a side door. The warehouse interior stretched in a vast open space, filled with metal shelving units and unmarked crates. The fire had started near the center of the building, creating a pocket of intense heat surrounded by areas still untouched by flames. "Check behind those shelves," I called to Rodriguez. "I'll take the office." The small administrative office stood separated from the main floor by a glass partition. As I approached, the sensor concealed in my equipment gave 3 quick vibrations against my chest, the signal Davis had programmed to indicate Substance 7. I glanced toward Rodriguez, who had moved deeper into the warehouse, then slipped into the office. The room appeared standard. Desk, filing cabinets, computer workstation. Nothing that would trigger my sensor. I scanned methodically, following the increasing frequency of vibrations toward the back wall. A large poster of the company logo hung there, slightly askew. I pulled it aside to reveal a metal door with no handle or visible locking mechanism. The entire surface was covered in geometric patterns. The markings matched those from Flight 93 with perfect precision. The same configurations I'd photographed in Shanksville 14 years earlier. The sensor vibrated continuously now, registering intense readings. I pulled out my phone and took rapid photographs of the entire door, making sure to capture every detail of the inscribed patterns. The material pulsed faintly with that recognizable blue luminescence, responding to my proximity. "Keller, you find anything?" Rodriguez called from the main floor. "Clear in here," I replied, quickly replacing the poster. "Coming out." We completed our sweep, finding no victims. The fire was contained within 2 hours, classified as an electrical fault in the official report. I said nothing about the door, keeping my secrets as I had for a decade. When I returned to the scene the next day for standard follow-up, the office had been removed, not damaged or destroyed, completely extracted from the building structure. The space it had occupied was empty, the concrete floor fresh and unmarked. No one else on the department mentioned the missing section as though it had never existed. Through the reflection in a fire truck's window, I spotted them. 2 men in immaculate black suits observing from the perimeter. Their posture and expressionless faces marked them clearly as Division 6, though they displayed no identification. One of them stared at me hard. Something about his eyes seemed known to me. I completed my tasks and left without acknowledging their presence. That night, I uploaded the photographs through our secure network to Davis and the others, using 3 different encrypted channels to prevent interception. The analysis took weeks, with members comparing the patterns to others we'd documented over the years. The conclusion, when it finally came, confirmed what I'd suspected since Nebraska. The patterns make a progressive sequence, Davis explained during our secure video conference. The Flight 93 device wasn't just one activation, it was the first in a series. Each anomalous event since then has strengthened the connection between dimensions. Like digging a tunnel from both sides, added Martelli, a former 89th physicist now teaching at a community college in Oregon. Division 6 created the initial breach deliberately, I said. But why? What could possibly be worth the risk? Technology, suggested Wilson, who'd served in the 89th Engineering Division. The reports we've compiled show quantum leaps in certain defense contractors' capabilities after major incidents. Right after Millfield, Nexus Dynamics patented a material with properties that violate conventional physics. The same company received a classified contract worth billions 3 months later. We all felt the weight of what this meant. Division 6 wasn't just studying anomalies, they were trading access to our reality for technology. Every incident we'd contained during our service, every entity we'd encountered, had been allowed through intentionally. The 89th and other units were merely containment measures, cleaning up after transactions we weren't meant to understand. It's getting worse, Davis said quietly. The readings from Pittsburgh match what we recorded 2 days before Hastings. Whatever came through there is coming again, but bigger. How long? I asked. Based on the progression, months, not years. The connection ended, but the conversation continued in my head throughout the night. Division 6 had opened a door they couldn't control. Each entity that crossed over served as a beacon for larger incursions. The invasion wasn't swift or violent. It was methodical, patient, operating on a timescale beyond human comprehension. Over the next week, I compiled everything our network had gathered: photographs, sensor readings, testimonies, documented anomalies, missing persons, statistics, and weather pattern analyses. I created redundant packages, each containing complete information, and established secure delivery protocols to journalists, congressional oversight committees, and military officials outside Division 6's influence. The system was designed as a dead man's switch. If anything happened to me, if I failed to enter a specific code every 72 hours, the information would automatically release to all recipients. Division 6 might eliminate one whistleblower, but they couldn't contain the truth once it spread beyond their reach. As I finalized the preparations in my apartment, a knock came at my door. 3 precise raps, evenly spaced. I recognized the pattern immediately, the same as a decade earlier when Division 6 had delivered their warning. I checked the peephole to confirm what I already knew. The man from the warehouse stood outside, his expression as blank as ever. Behind him waited 2 others with the same manufactured anonymity. This moment had always been inevitable. They had monitored me for years, allowing my investigation to continue as long as it posed no immediate threat. Something had changed their calculation. Perhaps they had detected my preparations, or perhaps the timetable for their next operation had accelerated. I didn't open the door. Instead, I moved to the Kit Davis and pressed a button on an innocuous device beside my coffee maker. The dead man's switch activated immediately, beginning the countdown to information release. Whatever happened next, the truth would survive. The knocking came again, more insistent. I knew they would enter regardless of my response. Division 6 operated beyond legal constraints, beyond accountability. They had erased entire towns from existence. A single apartment door posed no obstacle. I had spent years preparing for this moment, understanding it might be my last contribution to the fight. Knowing what existed beyond conventional reality was hard to bear, but staying silent would be worse. I thought of Sarge, of Lopez, of the thousands in Hastings who never knew what consumed them. Someone had to speak for them. The world isn't as simple or as safe as most believe. The comfortable reality we inhabit is thin, permeable, and under constant threat. While units like the 89th stand as the first line of defense against incomprehensible dangers, they fight without understanding the true nature of what they face, or who truly controls their missions. The boundary between worlds has been compromised. Something vast and patient is finding its way through, invited by those who believe they can control forces beyond human comprehension. The evidence is there for those willing to see it, in unexplained phenomena, in government cover-ups, in the patterns that emerge when you know what to look for. I've done what I can. I've gathered the evidence, connected the survivors, and ensured the truth will be heard. What happens next depends on how many choose to listen, and how many choose to look away. The door began to splinter. Division 6 had made their decision, and so had I. Whatever waited on the other side, I would face it knowing I had kept faith with Sarge's final words.